There's two on Zoom.
Call the meeting to order and welcome everyone to the March 25, 2024 City of Kalispell's work session. Can I have a roll call, please?
Counselor Fisher,
Here.
Counselor Hunter, Counselor Nunnally, Counselor Carlson, Counselor Gabrielle,
Here.
Counselor Graham,
Here.
Counselor Dowd,
Here.
Counselor Dahlman,
Here.
and Mayor Johnson.
Here. We have a couple items for discussion this evening. The first item is the Charles Hotel and Parking Garage multifamily project update. Mr. Russell?
Yeah, Mayor and Council, as you're aware of, we've previously entered into an agreement that includes the development of a hotel at our third and main lot and also a parking structure with multifamily housing atop of it at the, what's formerly called the Eagles lot. That was executed and then included multiple timeframes related to it. Part of the development agreements that were executed included the provision for staff to extend the agreements, just because knowing construction, knowing the development of projects, especially that magnitude, that certainly could be a potential as the project went on. So we did enter into several extensions. As we came up to the end of the current one, which ends at the end of March, we just thought it might be a good idea to bring it back in before council for the discussion, just to reorient everyone with the project, see if we're comfortable with extending it. We do have the developer here who can give a background on where they've been, still very motivated in getting the project done and looking at potentially some options for the extension. And again, it's one of those things where, again, we can alter those just at the staff level or bring it back here if there's any modifications that need to be formalized with any extension. But just thought it'd be a good idea to bring it back before council and for the community. We get lots of questions. Had a lot recently with the fencing around that lot. That was for the environmental cleanup I talked about a little while ago. So that lot still is under City of Kalispell ownership, but having that environmental cleanup done at this point is good no matter what happens with that lot. Would have had to have been one of the things undertaken anyway. So I don't know, Jared, if there's anything you wanted to add before we turn it over to our partner, Bill Goldberg has come up. So if it okay with you, Mayor, we can invite Bill to get up and just kind of give a little bit of a history about where they've been and where they'd like to go, and really just kind of engage in discussion with council on this project, and then we'll follow direction from council. So, Bill, if you don't mind.
Good evening. Thank you guys for taking the time to hear us out here. Little recap, I guess, just to get it all back on everybody's radar. It's been on ours for over 3 years, but big picture, we've stayed diligent about taking the next steps that were outlined at the initial RFP stage. As you guys know, you were part of some of the extension requests prior. And as things started to transition from, that first January of 21 rolling out, the process for us to get the designs to the next step, the project obviously morphed from just the hotel thought on 3rd and Main to the parking structure. We obviously had to park the project, and then that continued to transition into a discussion about providing housing and the idea that you have a lot or property of that size to maximize the use of the property. Then we dove into the thoughts of adding apartments on top of the parking structure. All through that process, our group, Montana Hotel Development Partners, continued to work with architects, consultants, designers, to basically narrow up on what that product was going to look like. And we had that initial time frame of being started at a specific date. The market continued to do what it's doing. You're going to hear me say that over and over again, and I'm sure you guys have dealt with it in your own lives. So as it continued to shift, we stayed focused with our directive to define what the hotel is. We basically, I would say, capped that out and said that that's the height, that's the room counts, everything, and then started running financial models on what that would look like. Then shift to the parking structure. Not that they're not happen simultaneously, but that one with adding the apartments really took that project to a whole nother scale. So total, we don't have it hard bid, but when you look at both the Third and Main lot and the Eagles lot, those projects, we're looking north of $80 million. So we continued to work with a group, JMA, who specializes in the boutique hotel market. Things continued to slide on the timeline because of the lack of the ability to take the next steps with the funding to commit to signing a buy-sell with the city. It wasn't a stall tactic on my part. It was the reality that I didn't want to take the next step without having the capital fully procured, because I was concerned about what the risk would be trying to unwind that commitment. So we continued through the pressure to JMA that we need to have the full commitment and a timeline so that we could reply back to the city's request. We get asked every single week where this project's at. And sometimes we have a bit of an answer, but for a while we hadn't, because we were struggling to get the commitment. January, I made the request to set a deadline that we had the commitment or not, and if not, that we had to find a new capital partner. It's a big shift. It wasn't from lack of trying. It wasn't from lack of motivation to the project. It's just the economic climate. And I don't want to just, we've talked about this land hold feel that that's all they're trying to do is buy time. Well, I do need more time. I can't sugarcoat that. But the motivation is there on our team to keep the pressure and keep the hunt on to go find the next capital partner. So a gentleman that I've worked with for years, I approached him in February and I said, is there any way that you would step in to the capital side of things here? And his first statement was, Bill, what's our time frame? And I said, well, technically it's March 31st. And I'm supposed to be started with construction, which obviously that's not happening. And everybody with the fence, I got 1 million phone calls that you guys are getting started. Bill, you said you weren't getting started. What's going on? And I wish we were started ourselves, but I continued the discussion with, his name is Stephen K. And I said, I will request an extension, but I don't want to request another extension with the city of Kalispell without money behind it. You guys have been very understanding of the magnitude of the project. I think everybody here wants to see this built. We hear it all the time. It would be such a huge catalyst for downtown Kalispell to take the next steps. And we obviously believe that. To date, we've got almost $700,000 tied up in this. I know I'm not asking for like sympathy. It's just the reality is we're staying moving forward on this. But we also understand that the deadline that was in place is up. And Stephen understood everything, and I then called Jared and Doug and said, I don't know what this looks like. In the past, we had requested an extension and explained our situation, but I don't feel comfortable requesting another extension because I know that everybody feels like it's a stall. And I'm saying, what can we do to show that we're still committed to the project? So we looked at several things, and I've been all over the map on what that looks like. The monies that we're committing to the project continually, the more I put into the extension, the more it costs and the more money I got to go procure quicker. So I had thrown out the idea of, having a number that we all agree upon. And one of those of which, even though I understand it was back when the RFP was initial, the value of that lot at the time with the $270,000 was a question to say, if that $270,000 was committed, would that be enough to request the extension? Then it's the extension timeline. That's a big one. Obviously, the reality that going through the design phase, engineering, everything, it's going to take quite a bit of time. So we looked at it and said, what's the reality of actually being started on this project? And because one leads to another, it's not like I can just start the hotel or just start the parking garage. I need the parking garage to open the hotel. So we've talked about schedules, and based on those schedules of what this is actually going to take, I was just talking with Shane, we've got a year of design work. I've got 7 figures of capital that has to be committed to that. And then we get to take the next steps and the next steps. Well, market-wise, I wouldn't be standing here if I already had that capital procured. So I'm on the hunt right now. Why a lot of you haven't seen me in the last few months, I have been in more states talking to more people than I have in the last 5 years total. I'm reaching out to other potential sources that I hadn't even thought of. And we're getting some traction, but I'm still hearing the same thing. Right now, Bill, we cannot commit to that capital being allocated to a project like that, considering the economic climate. But keep us in mind, this is what we target. So I wouldn't go to this step just on parties that I don't have a relationship with. But because of the commitment with Stephen K., I said, if that was accepted by the city of Kalispell, would you be willing to put up? I actually asked for all the money. He's willing to put up some of the money, and I'm willing to put up the rest. So I present that, but I also ask for discussion or I'm not drawing a line. I'm just saying, starting somewhere. I threw out the idea of, us making the payments to the city on a quarterly basis to show that we're staying committed to this. But if I get this done in 1 year or 2 years or 3 years, initially I had asked for 5, and I felt awkward asking that. I know it seems like a long time, but with what we know of the tasks at hand to get us to that step, I think that it's a comfortable date to look at and say, okay, 60 months out, when we work our total schedule, I won't be coming back asking for another extension. I don't want to ask for another extension. I want to get this capital lined up, and I want to go. But I also have to understand from them that partially that 60 months, some of that's going to be the market coming back. And I know that's speculative, but we're going to have almost $1 million tied up in this thing. And I would hope that that shows a level of commitment to the project to see it happen. So I say that with, is that a discussion point that we look at the $270,000? I talked to Steven tonight and, he said, well, what are you putting up initially? And I said, I haven't even asked that question yet. So is there a number that makes sense to, get us started with this? And then we know we've got that extension finalized so that Steven and others that we bring on board on the capital level understand that we've got to start getting this capital dispersed to take this project to the next step. It starts with the extension. If I don't get the extension, there's no way to sugarcoat it to you guys. We're obviously out of time on the 31st. I don't really have any other options on my side to do anything else. So when this special session was presented, I said, I'm there. I can answer, I think, any question that could be presented on what we've done to date and what we would continue to do should the extension be granted. I've worked with Shane on getting a schedule itemized. It is going to take some time, and I cannot specifically tell you when I think that the capital is going to actually come in to Montana Hotel Development Partners to be able to be dispersed, but it's kind of where we're at.
Yeah, I guess what the idea is, where does council want to go with it in terms of just general discussion? And, we'll happy to answer any questions from our end as well that council may have.
So talking about the extensions, and I'm hearing, that it goes through and displays a level of commitment to the project from the developer, to get in under those extensions deadlines. For other projects within the city, I've never really gone through and made a connection of an extension deadline being something that the developer is showing for commitment to the project. I've never had a feeling that a developer of a project didn't have commitment to the project. So I guess I'm trying to figure out is the importance of the extensions, do they carry the importance with it just because they're in the agreement?
Yeah, because this is a public-private partnership. Most situations, you're looking at a completely independent development that there's no reason to request an extension other than, you've received plat extensions and requests for those as things have been delayed, but completely different type of arrangement.
And I think that's probably what I'm talking about is I see the difference. I'm talking about the plat extensions and stuff like that. So yeah, there's the difference there.
Yeah, this is mainly just because, we've got municipal property at play here as part of the agreement, plus the parking garage component of it, being essentially public use and using urban renewal funds as part of that project as well. So those all tie into a development agreement. We usually look at trying to put some form of a deadline in there as a type of a clawback. This is, the deadline's in there as one to essentially be able to get that property back and restart it if ever needed. And as you're looking at that, we could do that, put it back out for another RFP. With the market as it is, you're not going to get a project of this magnitude. I mean, we only got that one to begin with.
Right.
And especially in this environment, they're not going to be able to finance them. I mean, I sent out the link of, a similar project, a neighboring community that is put on pause for the moment while they find a more favorable financial market. And the one thing I'd say, on this as we've gone on, is, myself and Jared and staff have met with the financial individuals that Mr. Goldberg has talked about. They've come here. We've had the assurances from the banking institutions that have been part of it. It's just bringing those all into a single point at the same time on a project of that magnitude is challenging. So we've met with different aspects of them that they brought to the table, and we're moving forward in it. It's a big project, and as we see, in that link with the neighboring community, sometimes they do fall apart. So I would definitely agree with Mr. Goldberg that it hasn't been from a lack of moving forward, and they had it all lined up, when the project was in place. That was one of the main things looked at. Do you have that there? Well, it's there. Shortly thereafter, markets changed pretty rapidly, and that's what brought us here. So getting back to the deadlines, it's looking to see, okay, has, anything moved forward? What is it? Bill talked about, just a land hold type thing. Well, that's really there for that purpose, to avoid that. And that's why you also have extensions in place, is, given the discretion for the staff to move and provide those extensions in there, which we've done. It just, after 2 years, we thought it might be a good idea just to bring it back before the council and the community, just to get that reaffirmation. Like I said, if we took it back out and did another RFP, honestly, you're probably looking at the same type of scenario in terms of time to get something of this magnitude put together and in place.
Well, and in the financial economics of, development and stuff, they're going to affect any project. So I look at what we had gone through and approved before. I look at it as kind of an anchor project for the downtown TIF. So, it's important too. I guess I want to hear from other council members what they think about it. I've never been in this situation before. I don't know that I don't know that I'm comfortable with the idea of the payment coming to the city for that. I understand now you're talking about it is to show goodwill from the developer that they're still committed to it, right? Is that the intention?
Oh, yeah, just to really put it out there, again, we're talking about a request for a 5-year extension. So, tying up that parcel at 7 years is really to provide, council and community that confidence that there's some skin in the game by our partner on this project.
Okay. At what point do we start to kind of become a part of the problem as far as, say, the economics and financials of the project? At what point do we start becoming a part of the problem with that? That's a rhetorical question, I guess.
Mr. Fisher.
Mr. Graham, I understand your concerns, but I, for one counselor, still believe in this project. I get what they're going through with these times. We're seeing it with city budgets and everything we're trying to plan for. I'd hate to see this go away. I do think it's an anchor. I think it's an important project. I just don't see how we can go wrong with this offer of covering this investment. The taxpayers will see that they're committed, still committed, even after they're 750, 800K in. They're going in another 270. I think it makes sense. I think 5 years is reasonable with everything that they've gone through, and I still believe this is a really good project for Kalispell, but I get some of your questions, but I think the money continues to show that commitment and
Okay.
shows the taxpayers that we're watching out for this project as well. I think that to be important.
I don't know if you want me to answer any of what
Yep, certainly, yeah.
question you were. I treated it kind of like if I was in the situation in a deal on another property, that at a certain point it's almost like I called it earnest money at first, and I think that was the wrong term. But it's like when somebody puts up that money, then I know that they're that much more real on the project. And I felt like because I hear it all the time, I read it, I see it, I hear it. That's why we put it out there. It's kind of how we do business, I would say. I mean, that's why it was presented. I was really adamant that I didn't want to ask for another extension for free because I knew that people that were tracking this in the community that look at it and say, is this just a hold for them? Well, anybody that wants to come talk to me, I've told you guys, I've got up to this podium, I've never had anybody come to my office, ever. I welcome it. I'll show them everything we're doing. But to me, the money was the next step in the commitment. I'm not saying I'm right, but I understand and I can appreciate the concern on it as well. But that's why we threw it out there.
Counselor Dahlman has had her hand up for a while.
Oh, sorry.
Thanks, Sid. Appreciate it. So I got dumb questions. So where are we in timeline with the downtown TIF in following with this?
Well, they're associated, but they aren't tracking in that. I mean, the downtown TIF is up and established and generating increment based on the increased value of the downtown boundaries.
When's the sunset on that downtown TIF right now?
It would be 15 years from the initial date that it was established, so probably 3 years ago, so 12 years maybe, approximately. However, as we'll see in an upcoming work session, we'll have a proposal for fulfilling some of the other recommendations in the urban renewal area with some of the infrastructure and utilities improvements that may result in bonding out on that could extend it for upwards of, I think, another 20 years.
Okay. And then, Mr. Goldberg, you were saying that you would be happy to kind of give us a little bit of a, glimpse into what a 5-year extension would mean. And I know you just explained a lot about the funding, but, if we gave you this 5-year extension, I mean, what is the public going to expect? Can you lightly touch on that for us?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it hinges upon being able to take the next step because the capital is procured, even if it's in incremental stages. But the groups and, even JMA we still have a great relationship with JMA. They still love this project. If the market changes, they are 100% interested in coming back to be a part of this. But right now we're going out to other capital sources to outline everything. We thought we had our capital partner. So what's difficult to try to answer your question is, when do I think the investing market will step up to commit that capital? I wish I had an answer for you on that. And that's partially why I'm asking for the 5-year extension. I threw it out even at one point of saying the minimum, like if there was big resistance on the 5, if I can't get 3, I don't think I can do this. And I have the agreement with my partners that we would have to just bow out and cut our losses. So that's the tricky part about it. Once that capital's committed or even partially committed, then I can sign the contracts with the design team and get that next step done with the architects, the engineers, everybody to get the ball rolling to a point where we can show that time frame of what that design phase is going to take. Now, that's anticipated on certain start dates, of course. And then city process. This is a big, big project. Everybody understands that. So it's going to take months to go through that approval process. And then we've stayed in contact with 2 of the largest construction companies in Montana they are very excited about being a part of this project. So we feel that we've got a great team to be able to outline those schedules. My hope is to have it where we could have multiple contractors engaged, where one could be building the hotel and one would be building the parking garage and the multifamily, to accelerate the schedule. So it's kind of chicken and the egg, but I'm fully transparent about outlining everything of what we think we could do should the extension be approved.
Well, I think your hope definitely deserves $270,000 at this point, and that I didn't mean that as any sort of dig at you at all, but it's been a few extensions, and I think that does read out to the public in a way that makes it seem like you're more serious, and I believe 100% that you are, and all of the capital that you have put into it so far. But not everybody pays as close attention as we do.
And I think that's why it was prudent on our part to bring something to the table here, something that we didn't have a specific guideline on what that should be. We had extensive discussion about what that could look like, would look like, but much to what Chad's saying, it becomes a part of the problem if it's too much as well, where we struggle to say, well, if we had that capital, we would have deployed it to continue the project. So that's how we came up with this figure.
Thanks, Your Honor. So I just am trying to pull everything back into perspective. We're having the same problems with our capital projects, right? Some of them are being delayed because of the lack of funding, or because we can't find people that actually do the work. The prices have doubled or skyrocketed over the last few years. And, I understand that this is a big project that's in the view of the community, for sure. This is a big deal. Now, we've been trying to do something with that parking lot way before I even got on council. We want to make a good improvement to the downtown area. I still think this fits into that. And I don't really think that, I'm in favor of the extension, just because I don't think we're going to get anything this ambitious and good for downtown if we went back out to RFP, if we get a response at all to that. So I'm going to be in favor of the extension. And, I just want everybody to put this back into perspective, what this is going to be at the end of this journey, where we'll have a parking garage, we'll have more housing for Kalispell, we'll have a boutique hotel downtown, drawing more business to our downtown businesses. So I'm trying to make sure we reverse this and put it back into perspective. This is not something that we don't deal with every single project that we're doing, which are all public projects. This is just the same, story we're hearing from everything as far as construction goes these days.
We're in the same boat on my project out on 3 Mile that you guys know about. I'm in the same boat. I've, not to quantify it, but got $6 million tied up out there, and I can't get the capital secured right now. I just can't. And we're still going to keep hunting and trying to find those guys that will step up. It will happen. It's just timing. That's all this is.
Question, Mr. Goldberg, when we looked at the original scope of this, it was a hotel, parking garage. And it was really through conversations of, well, we'd rather have, some people say, well, we want housing, we want apartments. And I can remember a couple of years ago going, careful what you ask for, you're gonna get it. So now we got all this inventory. So when you talk about market, I want everyone to understand, this isn't just access to cash. It's that deployment of cash, and one is that return of capital and then return on capital. So I guess, can you give a quick, synopsis of what you're seeing right now? Where are we at with inventory within Kalispell, all the stuff that we brought online? I mean, I know that's gotta be some of the roadblocks your investors are looking at going, what's the absorption time, Mr. Goldberg?
Absolutely. It's part of my discussions, I won't say every day, but every week. And it's shocking how fast it changes. So a lot of us in the development world, we all talk. I always say I don't treat any of them as competitors. We're all in it in the community. We're trying to provide product that we believe the community needs. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing this. Specific to multifamily, that's tough. In my opinion, I think we saw the peak of pricing because rents are going down. Nobody can argue that right now. All the data supports that those numbers are dropping. Well, in a development with hundreds of units, drop the price of the rent $100 and watch how fast it derails your project. It's just a fact. So watch it drop $400, you go on hold. I think we've designed, albeit somewhat conceptual on some of the best product for the community, whether it's multifamily, whether it's a boutique hotel, the parking garage, hell, who's going to argue that? But they all cost big money. So when that potential yield is not there, the numbers don't lie. So for us, it's become, well, if we did this, would that change the numbers? That's why this project morphed into housing. I had numerous conversations about, are we going to be the guy or the group that proposes an 8-story building? Shane will tell you, I was always for it, always. But I started this process literally 3 months after I moved to Kalispell. I didn't want to be the guy that just shook the tree right out the get-go. Getting to know everybody, understanding the community and the needs. And I think some of it's obvious, but I want all that input. I love this process. I'm not intimidated by any bit of it. I love the communication everybody has, the collaboration, and that's what shifted this into a bigger project. Now, that does affect the numbers in a positive way. So Stephen K. initially said, Bill, I'm probably not the right fit for this. We just finished up a $40 million project up in Whitefish for Mr. K. It's wrapped up, it's done. He's saying, where are we going next? And I always kept pitching, you got to get to Kalispell. You got to get to Kalispell. Now, unbeknownst to me, Mr. K owned the KM building before Bill Goodman. So when I told him I bought the building and all the work that we've been doing, he said, you're really committed to Kalispell, aren't you? I don't know what more I can do to show that commitment, but I understand, like, talk is cheap. We gotta get to the next step. That's the ironic part. I really haven't built anything in Kalispell yet. But all this work and millions of dollars of planning, thousands of hours with everybody, I'm as committed now as I was the day we started. It's a little discouraging because of the market, but I know it's going to change. So for us, I'm aligned with a gentleman now that I have 100% confidence in if I got the time.
And Mr. Graham, as we look back over time, you know, these things cycle. And I was getting a little concerned a year ago. We were rolling over from the peak of development and gonna hit a recession. Small R, big R, who knows what it's gonna be. But the last time this happened, 2008, 2009, as a city, we kind of did make, not necessarily direct investment, but with Silverbrook. They were ready to plat things, we gave them extensions, and then we said, look, we'll just take that section of lots and you won't have to subdivide that, because it saved them on real estate taxes. Is that?
So before I got here, but I believe you're correct. I believe they had everything platted out and then replatted for fewer lots
Right.
to ease. If you have one lot, you're probably gonna have a cap on some of your assessments versus 15 lots. So I think it was a substantial savings for that developer
Right.
based on times of the market.
Based on the times of the market. So in the past, we have done similar things, especially on a project where there was a huge financial commitment at that point. And we saw that being essentially at the time kind of what we think is the northern bounds of Kalispell. I'd like to still argue we'll go up to the south side of Highway 40, but that's just maybe to egg someone on a whitefish to approve something on the south side of Highway 40 one of these years, maybe before I'm 90. But when we look at the commitment, we look at this project, you know, the thought is we could have put this out in bid and sold it for $270 and had no control, but we elected to go down the road to have participation in a project. I look at this as an anchor building, an anchor project for downtown Kalispell. A commitment for the parking garage, the apartments, that scale going up to the apartments, okay. It's a big ask, but I understand exactly where we are with time, with money. And really what you're saying, Mr. Goldberg, is we as a council and do we as a community believe in you as much as you believe in us to give you the time to put this together based on what's occurred over the last year when capitals started to pull in. Because in all reality, as I advise clients, you're sitting with clients going, okay, we can deploy the capital and we're going to get an 8, 9, 10 cap back. But, you know, Mr. Goldberg, I can sit in treasury bills and get 5.2% right now. And the only risk is Mr. Schumer doesn't vote for something and I don't get paid.
Yep.
Until they actually pay me when the government shutdown's over. That's really where we're at. And
100%.
we're waiting for interest rates to come down. We've already heard the Fed is, you know, they've already spelled out 3 rate cuts this year. Yet I hear the economy is booming and record unemployment, and I'm going, if the Fed is already telegraphing rate cuts, there's some weakness at the seams of the economy that is being glossed over. And if you look deep, you actually see the economy is not as solid as some in the press would give us thought. I'm completely for the vision. I'm completely for the project, and I think, you know, I look at what are the alternatives. So I'm sitting here going, okay, I can vote, let's do the extension, and you know what? In all reality, we can collect over 5 years the same amount of money we'd get if we just said, Mr. Goldberg, sorry, you know, we're washing our hands, we're gonna put the property out for bid. You know, I can get the taxpayers in the same position and actually have a better ability to add more to the tax base. And I'd like to remind everybody, our job here is to protect the tax base. That is what we do with policy. Because if we don't protect the tax base, we can't provide the services that we need to provide to manage a city. And we've already seen the need to improve the tax base just with what we've seen with costs. So I'm in favor of moving forward with an extension. I'm kind of getting that general feel.
Yeah, I guess if I wasn't clear when I was speaking before, I'm in favor of an extension. My part of it was kind of agreeing with you which I was glad to hear you say that, you know, as much as, you know, we go through and have faith in our development community as well, as much as, you know, you're coming in saying you're committed to Kalispell, we're committed to the people doing the work within Kalispell as well. So that is why I kind of was going out there and saying I don't know where I'm at on the ask though for the financial component of it. I guess that's the only thing that I have.
And I think, and I can understand exactly where Mr. Goldberg's coming from this. We've had 2 years through, and you understand where we're at. Having to answer, we have taxpayers, we have everybody going, okay, this was supposed to have started. You're essentially putting us in the same position we'd been in if we had just not gone through this and just gone out and put it for bid and sold the property. So in all reality, we still have access, we still have input into what happens, and we're part of the process. And in the meantime now, based on what's happened over time, we get some compensation for participating in that. I mean, I'm very comfortable with that.
Okay.
I think I understand where you're coming from as well, but I also think that we do have that responsibility to the taxpayers on the other side of this.
I'll take the free extension, but
No, I know.
no, I'm kidding. I'm just joking.
Just hope it gets reported correctly.
That's right, yeah.
And to be truthful, I wouldn't want the free extension, because then I have to answer it that much more to the public every week. It's not that I'm buying anything specific other than saying, I think this was the right thing to do, and I will have that conversation over and over and over again with anybody in the public so that they understand. Because a lot of people, they don't know what they don't know. So
We'll craft in the resolution something about, this is a time impact fee. Ms. Dahlman?
Thank you. I'm also in favor of this extension. You know, I agree with Mr. Dowd, and of course you, Mayor, that, you know, we have to look at the future and look what all of this brings, and the, you know, ability of this being an anchor project and just kind of taking things to the next level. And I appreciate your commitment to Kalispell, Mr. Goldberg, and my vote's yes. Thank you.
Well, we're in a work session, but I appreciate the strong show of support. Ms. Dahlman.
I will be showing support for this in the future.
And Ms. Gabriel?
Thank you, Your Honor. I too support it, and I think that Mr. Goldman's, you know, offer to put that up, to hold it a bit longer, is a fair thing for the citizens to believe that we are doing the right thing by the citizens and the tax base. So I think that's a good way to handle it, and I look forward to it moving through, and I hope things change here real quick. And I appreciate you coming forth and being very honest about where you're at and letting us know. And I look forward to supporting it when the time comes, when we can vote.
I'd like to say, Mr. Goldberg, soft costs cost cold hard cash.
Yep.
So it's a significant investment already to date. Okay, anything else from staff on?
No, I think we're good. So we'll work on putting together a formalized 5-year extension. We'll work with the terms of that, basically outline, you know, quarterly payments divided up over those at, I think it was at $13,500 every quarter, and we'll get something put in place and bring it back before council. Probably won't be next week. Ideally, we can get it on in 3 weeks, but it just depends on how quickly it all comes together, and we'll start working on it.
Does that go into the TIF?
No, it'd be a general fund component.
General fund. Okay, thank you, Mr. Goldberg.
Thank you.
Sidewalk maintenance.
Yeah, Mayor and Council. Next item on the agenda is really an overview of the ordinances for sidewalk maintenance within our city code. As you'll hear, there's a couple of areas that make things somewhat difficult in terms of the maintenance and timelines, and then what happens when adjacent property owners refuse to address some of those hazards and the liability that causes on the city, and just that process of what was required to put an order in place for us to then go out, repair, and assess the property. So with that brief introduction, I'll turn it over to our Director of Public Works, Susie Turner, for the staff report.
Thank you. Good evening, Your Honor and council members. As Doug alluded, our sidewalk code it's antiquated and it's time for an update. We've ran into a few scenarios that provided the motivation to come in front of council. So we'll be stepping through the sidewalk code, providing some suggestions, looking for some discussion back from council on those suggestions. And then we fully anticipate coming back for another work session to work through a couple other items. So some of the changes that we're asking in discussion, we're asking may need time for consideration also. So probably come back with another work session on these topics. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Keith Haskins, our city engineer, and we're going to talk about sidewalks.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. Tonight we'll be providing an overview on sidewalks. Recently, in a review of the municipal code and a couple of sections of sidewalk.
Your mic's not on.
It's on. Well,
There you go.
I have to hold it.
How about that? Is that okay?
I'll hold
Try
it.
again.
I'll hold it. Yeah, I don't know if it's gonna pick me up. Hey,
I hear you good.
there we
You
go.
hear? Okay.
All right. So recently, in a review of the municipal code and a couple of sections of sidewalk that need repair, staff has provided notices to property owners regarding the necessary replacement of sidewalk, and no action has been taken by the property owners. Per the municipal code, the next step for staff would be to prepare a report for the city manager that would then be provided to council, and then council could cause the sidewalk to be repaired. Looking through the municipal code on sidewalk and curb, we thought this would be a good opportunity to review the codes with council and discuss the responsibilities for council, for staff, and property owners regarding sidewalks and curbs. Goals for tonight. First, we'll start with a review of the municipal code. Next, we'll quickly discuss some of the scenarios we see with sidewalks. Third, we'll discuss the 50-50 sidewalk replacement program. And finally, we hope to have some dialogue with council and get some direction on how council would like to proceed with some of the provisions currently in code with the 50-50 program and then with sidewalks in general. The municipal code that covers sidewalks in chapter 24 is titled Streets and Sidewalks. There are 10 articles in this chapter, but tonight we're only going to focus on articles 1 and 2. So the way I have this set up, we have the little yellow arrow that'll help us keep track of where we're at in our discussion. I have short summaries of each section on each slide, but if you want to look at the full text, we can click on the underlined sections and go to a slide with full text. Our intent is not to review each section in detail, but to focus on a few of the provisions. You'll notice as we work through the code, there are several sections which are marked as reserved. These sections previously had code which were subsequently removed or replaced with other code throughout the city's history. The sections are marked reserved so that future additional code, if applicable, can utilize those sections without having to renumber the entire code. Section 24-6, this section of code addresses private use of public property and is addressed primarily by our right-of-way permit process. Although not a focus of tonight's meeting, I would like to jump to that section of code real quick to look at a couple of lines of text. Section A. This section requires the public right-of-way to be kept clear of unnecessary obstructions, And section B, this section requires anyone who needs to utilize the right-of-way to obtain a permit. And that's what we issue right-of-way permits for in consideration of this section. Section C, we do have a couple of proposed changes for section C. At the top, the area highlighted in red should be removed. We currently do not process right-of-way permits in this manner. Only Public Works reviews the right-of-way permits, and therefore only the last sentence is really applicable. Number 5 should be updated. For the BID, we have a sidewalk usage permit, which requires insurance, which must be reviewed and approved by the city attorney. Public Works staff also verifies the permittee can provide enough space for an ADA compliant pedestrian corridor. This is not something that we police. The BID is supposed to verify compliance with the sidewalk use permits that we issue. Number 6 doesn't currently meet the state statute, as I understand it, for insurance of $1 million each occurrence and $3 million for aggregate. Additionally, this section would likely need to include a minimum bond. And this is where we plant a seed. We hope to meet with council in an upcoming work session to discuss right-of-way permitting and an enforcement response plan for right-of-way infractions. We don't currently have a good and expedient way to enforce right-of-way infractions. For example, if we have a bad permit holder who's a bad actor, we have insurance and bonding that we can use as tools for those permits. But our main issues are with work in the right-of-way without proper permitting, such as driveways, fence encroachments, and obstructions. So just planning that for a future work session. Section D should also, how do I go back? Should also be updated with the enforcement response plan for right-of-ways. This is a little easier for permitted projects, but not as easy for non-permitted work and use of the right-of-way. So going back, 24-7 is reserved. 24-8, this section requires any cellar doors along the street or sidewalk to be closed or secured to keep pedestrians from falling in. I actually can't think of any of these in the city, but this isn't a bad provision to have. No changes proposed. 24-9, this provision makes it unlawful to have a cellar door entrance or basement entrance or area that encroaches or occupies a public right-of-way. Again, not a bad provision, but no changes proposed. 24-10, this provision doesn't allow street vendors to occupy the street for more than 5 minutes to vend, sell, advertise, or dispose of goods and wares. And no changes proposed there either. Sections 24-11 through 13 are reserved. 14, a good provision. The section makes it unlawful to spit on sidewalks. 24.
Penalty is what? Wash their mouth out with soap?
Hey,
Must have been a problem at some time.
At some point, okay.
yeah, it's unlawful. I guess that'd be a city attorney question on that one. 24-15, this section prohibits eaves, gutters, troughs, and downspouts from extending into or projecting over or across streets and sidewalks without consent of city council. This section could be modified. Currently, we handle these types of encroachments via an encroachment permit, which isn't routed through or approved by council. So the provision does require council approval the way it's written. 24-16, this section requires end gates on vehicles to prevent scattering of rock or other debris in transport. 24-17, this is an important section, but in summary, it requires adjacent property owners to keep sidewalks clear and safe for pedestrians. Concerning snow removal, residential areas have 3 days to clear, and businesses have to have their walks clear by noon. 24-18, this is also an important section which prohibits snow from private property to be pushed into streets, sidewalks, or boulevards. And now we enter into Article 2, which is more of the focus of tonight's meeting. This article covers the construction and repair of sidewalks and curbs. Section 24-19, specifications, methods, and control generally. We want to take a quick stop at this section. I'll jump in there. Part of the issue is in the definitions of the wording. A join and a butt don't really fit the description for most of our sidewalks, which are offset from the street. Current city standards require a boulevard between the street and the sidewalk. And so we suggest replacing the red underlined text with, and which is within the public right-of-way. Secondly, we're not aware of rules and regulations for sidewalk. Our utilities have adopted rules and regulations, but the design construction standards are the requirements for streets, sidewalks, curbs, and crossings. So we suggest replacing the yellow underlined text with current standards for design and construction. I'll keep doing that. 2420. Oops, I jumped back. Sorry. Section A requires a permit for work within the right-of-way for any obstructions. That's what we use our right-of-way permit for. Section B refers to a special permit issued by the Committee on Streets and Alleys. From my review of the council minutes going back to the 60s, there were several committees that reported to council regularly. The Committee on Streets and Alleys was one of these. We don't currently have a Committee on Streets and Alleys or a special permit that would allow temporary construction measures for sidewalks. So we suggest replacing the text with this below. All repairs of sidewalks must be in conformity with currently adopted City of Kalispell standards for design and construction, the Americans Disabilities Act, and the Public Rights of Way Access Guidelines, or PROAG. Section C, this section requires the city engineer or engineering staff to lay out the grades and alignments of sidewalks for most of the sidewalks that are installed or replaced. We don't do that service. So we suggest replacing the text with the highlighted text. Grade and alignment required for the proper execution of sidewalk repairs or replacement shall comply with reference standards in Part B. Prior to replacement of concrete, alignment and grade shall be verified by the City Public Works engineering staff or by a Montana licensed professional engineer who will certify such compliance. Section 2421. All of these ones that have the text in green, I think that's green.
Yep.
These are they allow the city to order construction of curbs and sidewalks. So this section allows the council to order new sidewalk to be constructed in an area that the city would like to see infill occur. They can order that to be completed. I'll just go into this one real quick. Section 2421 allows the city or the council to order new sidewalk to be constructed. So in an area where council would like to see new sidewalk infill occur, they can order that to be completed. Staff recommends that the last part of the last sentence be removed, as the design and construction standards dictate the material requirements for curb and sidewalk. And while we're here, we'll just look at 2422. This section requires the clerk to publish an order in the paper. It also requires the installation by the property owner within 30 days. And then for the clerk to send a letter in the mail to the property owners. The notice indicates that if the properties don't install a sidewalk within the allotted time, the city will. So the format of an order for new sidewalk or curb is the council orders it, the clerk publishes a notice and sends a letter, the owner has 30 days to install, or the council can cause the work to be completed. And so we've already looked at that one.
Mr. Haskins, in your review of council minutes back to 1920, did you see where we actually ordered someone to build sidewalks?
I tried. I couldn't go back that far.
I mean, you'd have to go back, I'd imagine, forever.
Yeah. It's at least been decades since we've ordered new curb and sidewalk. 2423, if the property owners don't build the sidewalk within the 30 days specified in the notice, then the city can cause it to be completed. I'm not going to go to that section. 2425, Public Works staff would recommend removing this section in its entirety, and we'll go to that real quick. I guess I had some changes on 24, 23, but city council or authorized representative would have to supervise the construction. So staff would recommend that we remove that section. Part A requires supervision. Any work in the right-of-way would require a right-of-way permit, so we'll be inspecting the work and providing quality assurance already. I couldn't find any sort of standard test for sounding that's mentioned in there, but believe the material standards we have in place are adequate. Part B requires removal of subpar materials within 48 hours. The text goes on to require replacement within 10 days of condemnation. Again, since this work is covered by the right-of-way permit, we'd recommend removing this section in its entirety. 2426, this section covers how to assess properties for new construction. We have no suggested changes, so we can skip that unless someone wants to look at it. 2427, again, we have no suggested changes, but that section requires a special fund to be created for sidewalk and curb warrants. Basically, my understanding is if council were to order the sidewalk to be constructed, there should be enough money in the fund to cover the costs that would later be recovered by assessments. 2428 through 2430, we have no suggested changes, so we can skip through all those. Again, unless you want to look at it. 2431 requires barriers for construction. We do have a suggested change there. Basically, this section should be deleted because traffic and pedestrian controls, sorry about that, are already taken care of in the right-of-way permitting and handled through that process. So we get a pedestrian control plan and traffic control plan through the permitting process.
Keith, I'm going to back up just for a minute, just to verify, we skipped over the sections you didn't think, weren't asking for any changes. Basically, those outline that once council orders that work, the city will go in and do it if it's not done by the adjacent property owner, and then we will levy that cost back onto the property.
Correct.
So I just wanted to make sure that was
Yeah.
currently in the code how it states.
Yeah, and as you read through it, it has provisions for, you can collect those assessments over a period of 5 to 8 years. And just, the form of the warrants, coupons that would be applied. A lot of stuff that we haven't done since I've been here, and it doesn't appear for quite some time. 2432, this basically states that the city maintains jurisdiction over the maintenance of sidewalks. And then these last two sections are kind of the meat and potatoes of what we wanted to look at tonight.
What is maintenance then?
Maintenance would be clearing, maintaining, replacing sidewalk or curb.
Sidewalk that's in disrepair, so
Okay.
replacement of sidewalk that's a hazard, not ADA accessible, cracked, broken.
But not shoveling. Because that's the responsibility of the property owner.
Yeah, and that's covered in a previous section.
And so is maintenance. That's what I
Yeah.
wonder what
Maintenance
is
is
in.
kind of a general term used quite a bit.
Basically, this, from what I understand, this provision is just saying, the city still has control over how maintenance is required. So we can cause the property owner to maintain it. 2433, although this section specifies the use of the general fund, currently the 50/50 program's funded with street and gas tax monies. Per state codes, there are limitations on how much sidewalk can be replaced using these funds, so large wholesale replacements cannot be made with these funds. This section also specifies that the city clerk should keep an account of these repairs and certify the list to the city treasurer. Currently, Public Works coordinates directly with the treasurer for the 50/50 assessments. And additionally, this section states a 10% charge is applied to cover administration of the repairs. Currently, we do not charge for administration of the construction. So those would all be potential changes that we need on that one. 2434. This section basically creates some steps for what we should do as staff and council if there are sidewalks that need repair. So step one, the city engineers to barricade the unsafe sidewalk. Two, to notify the owner of the unsafe sidewalk and the need for repair, and or post the notice for the repair, and we provide 24 hours for the repair to be made. So we can't make it in 24 hours. I think that section needs to be fixed.
So would that go in unsafe condition for pedestrians? I've done a lot of trick or treating down Fifth in the dark. And a lot of those trees, I'm sure it's the same other aspects of the city too, on that east side. The roots have just lifted. Mm-hmm. So how does that fit into this? Because, I mean, we're talking the roots of these big trees.
Yep. Yeah, technically, when that sidewalk gets heaved and it's not ADA compliant anymore, per this provision, I should go barricade it off, notice the property owner that it needs to be repaired, and they would have 24 hours to get it repaired, or we would cause it to be repaired.
Okay, so, but the repair, the cause of the the unsafe condition is the tree. So we taking the tree out?
Usually, when we coordinate with parks,
Or does it depend on what the root is? Like, the root gets cut?
in very rare instances would we remove the tree, but we would cut out that root section typically, or in a couple of cases, we've actually ramped the sidewalk over the root.
Only in a couple.
Yeah.
Most of the time we cut the root and put the sidewalk down. But this is the section that we are not able to adhere to in a lot of areas. At all.
Well, 24 hours, I mean,
I
you're moving.
I kind of have another question then about this. We require the trees to be planted in the boulevard, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And then those trees get big and then they break the sidewalk, and then we're putting the cost of that on the homeowner, which may or may not have wanted the tree in the first place, but was basically forced to have it there. That seems a little strange to me. In those specific cases where it's the root of a tree that we required that does the damage.
Yeah. I think now Parks does a pretty good job of looking at the species that are planted in the boulevards, maybe more so than was done historically. And also, spacing requirements. We look at those quite a bit. Also for, clear vision triangle issues and other reasons as well.
And if you could point me to whoever allowed cottonwood trees to be one of those trees, please let me know.
I think that was Phil Mitchell.
Yeah, cottonwoods are not on the approved list.
Anymore.
It's hard to say what was this. Remember, this was in 47. That we had no forestry department in 47. I don't know if that was a requirement if those were put in voluntarily or by order, but we did not have an urban forestry department at that point in time.
All right, well, something happened because in 1903, there was not a single tree in Kalispell other than Woodland Park.
Also as the trees are age and are removed, then they're planted with more appropriate trees that don't have these root issues as they mature.
Sure, and I understand that, but
Kind of just a cycle.
there was obviously a time when those trees were allowed, or I don't know if we required them or just allowed them at the time. So that's something I'd like to,
I don't know.
I just don't want to put that burden back on the homeowner if they weren't the ones, even the homeowner at the time of the tree that was planted, had no choice but to put the tree in. Okay, I'm done talking about the tree thing here, but I just want you guys to think about that when you're rewriting this section.
Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Your Honor. You kind of skimmed over this, and maybe it's upcoming, but How popular is the 50/50 program and what is the budget for that 50/50 program?
Yeah, we'll look at that a little closer,
Okay,
but
okay, I'll wait, that's fine.
Okay.
And then, say somebody is injured, Chad and his family out trick or treating, who is liable? The city, the homeowner, or a combination of both? If somebody falls, on that heaved up sidewalk?
It
Yeah,
depends.
that process goes through a claim process, so it goes to HR and then the insurance determines that.
So,
Provide a few examples too. Sorry, Doug.
oh, yeah. So, I mean, ultimately, it's the property owner that's responsible. However, if we're aware of a hazard and are not engaging in this, then the city becomes liable.
We do not go out and walk the sidewalks and look for areas in disrepair. Our program is based off of complaints.
Or the homeowner who doesn't like the way their sidewalk looks in front of their home, contacting the city, asking to be involved in the 50/50 program.
Correct.
More often than not, that's the case,
Yeah, I would say so, yeah.
Yep.
which is a good program,
Agreed.
which many take advantage of. So I wish Chad was here, but most governments, like on your trails, do an inventory of your trails and how they look and what needs to be overlaid, chip sealed, et cetera. Could something like this be done with sidewalks to where a priority could be set on areas that had really slipped badly, but yet the appropriate trees have been planted to where that would not be a continual problem? Assess those sidewalks and do an area instead of piecemeal, place by place, can completely knock out a street or a few blocks within a budget that's allocated?
We do not have a code enforcement program.
I knew this was going to be your answer from a previous conversation, but
Now, if that's what council wants to fund, then we would have a code enforcement program and we could do an inventory of that. But then you run into the same question here, and you've already had one council member express question on responsible party. And so you just have to take all those things into factor, but the initial component of your question is, right now, no, we do not have those resources to go do that. If that's what council wants to do, then we will come back and bring forward what that would take.
I, for one, would rather see a block done right than piecemeal and a section here of 40, 60 feet and the rest of the block looking like heck. It makes sense to have something that's more organized, to have a block that's safe, move to 2 or 3 blocks. Yes, it could take a little money, but a section here, a section there, by the time somebody takes a spill or somebody identifies it or somebody complains enough, doesn't seem to make much sense with uniformity.
Well, we do it by complaint because then it goes to that specific address. And then you're going to have different levels of quality. I mean, you may have a section in front of one property that is in disrepair and an unsafe, but the adjacent may not be unsafe. So you're going to have some of that because, again, it's the responsibility of the property owner. We're not going to force property owner to pay for something that's not in a disrepair or into that trip hazard type component. If the whole thing needs it, and we have that, then that can certainly be that program related to it. But in terms of just going through and doing, a wholesale block at a time, you're probably replacing some panels that don't need it. And again, that's not something we'd want to put on the property owner to replace something that's not a hazard.
Thank you.
And I will vehemently oppose a Klusner officer out there, so.
To add to that, we really don't have a funding mechanism to replace large blocks of sidewalk.
Which we'll get into when we talk about the cost share funding that's available.
We can.
We can, yeah.
Hey, I got a question.
Yep.
I'm confused. So sidewalk is public property, but it is the responsibility of the homeowner to cover the cost of public property? And
Correct.
and the homeowner is liable, but it's a public property.
That's correct.
Yep.
So is that just the way things are done?
It's a fairly standard setup across municipalities.
Yep.
It doesn't make sense to me. I mean, I kind of agree with Jed. and I hear that you say we don't have a funding stream for it, but it seems like those are incongruent when you say it's public property, but it is the responsibility of the private citizen to pay for it, and it is the private citizen who carries the liability.
So I would just bring the example up of a driveway that goes across public property.
And the boulevards.
Yeah.
are treated very similar.
Yep. Maintenance mowing of the boulevards
Yep.
is pretty standard setup through municipality components. And there's even the maintenance of sidewalks. I mean, you can go through and see damage done by, dumping of, salt. Just in my own neighborhood, I can see who uses salt to dry ice on the sidewalk. That directly creates a degradation of the sidewalk. Now, granted, that doesn't happen in all circumstances in all properties, but that's just one instance. And again, you're just basically looking at standard practices for how codes have been established and written that is not unique to Kalispell.
I understand that it's not unique, but it doesn't mean that just the way it's been done has to be done that way forevermore. I think I've brought that up in a past council meeting. Thank you.
The answer to that is to pass a citywide assessment district to generate a revenue fund, which ultimately means that the property owners are going to be paying for it through an assessment process anyway.
I hear you.
I'm not going to say it.
Settle down, Mr. Dowd, that you're not getting that.
Nobody would enjoy my comments. So.
I would. Do it.
Is this it then, Keith?
No,
You've got more to.
I got
No,
more
yeah.
to go.
We sidebarred you for a minute there, and I
We're
just.
getting just into the fun part now.
Oh, good.
Yep.
It's got time.
So if not repaired, then the next step for staff is to prepare a report for the city manager, who would then bring that to council, and then council could cause the sidewalk to be repaired by the city.
So what? Oh, there you go.
So our proposed text change is whenever a sidewalk is in an unsafe condition for pedestrians, Public Works shall notify owner of the abutting property that the sidewalk must be repaired or replaced. Or if the adjacent property be unoccupied, then Public Works shall post a notice on such property requiring the sidewalk to be repaired or replaced. Repair or replacement shall be in accordance with the standards for design and construction, and all work shall be appropriately permitted. If the work is not completed within, and this is a placeholder, 90 days, the city shall cause the work to be completed. So that would be our plan or our proposal to simplify it, let staff work through these repairs rather than having to bring it to council. And then also just to refer to the design and construction standards, which also refer to the ADA and the PROAG requirements. And then just let us, Public Works, do the inspections to verify that the construction's done properly.
So what about timing? It says 90 days, but if the notification goes out in September, or it goes out in March.
Yeah, we kind of talked through some of those scenarios, and our thoughts on that is we would give them 90 days from April 1st. So we would look at seasonal considerations as we.
Because you could also go and have with the way, I mean, hopefully right now we're just in a situation where, time schedules can, tighten up a little bit, but I mean, you could be in a situation now where you may be waiting 90 days for somebody to show up
Yeah.
Yep, yep. And
in
I-
the summer.
yeah.
Because that's their busy time.
And like Keith was saying, if maybe we want to go to, I don't know.
It makes, I'm
120
just saying it
days.
makes sense that you would have that
There has to
number
be
on
some
there.
timeline in there, but
Right.
we also understand construction season.
In agreeing with you, I think it should be a year and 90 days. The homeowner can budget appropriately. They could plan on some time that would allow the contractors the ability to schedule because they're not that easy to get, especially when things are booming. A year and 90 days seems to make more sense with, when things are happening around here.
Yeah, I guess the only flip side to that is then you have a potentially hazardous sidewalk that's. gonna be
Understood,
in
but it's
place.
probably been that way for 15 years.
Yeah, but the difference would be that we would know about it, so, then everyone's a little
Good
at
point.
more risk.
Good
You'll
point.
see in one of our examples where the city was held responsible for knowing a sidewalk that was unsafe. So
Is-
we'll get into that. But
Yes.
you're right. There's got to be a reasonableness to that timeline. Maybe 6 months to help.
I
Does,
guess the other question is replace. So if I have the heaved sidewalk in front of my house, okay, I've noticed, I've tripped on it myself. Can I rip out that section and then the next summer replace it and have gravel there? Or are we better off in our standards say, no, we'd rather have the tripping hazard? It kind of, if we know about it, nothing solves it until that tripping hazard is removed. So if you say, well, no, you have to leave the tripping hazard until it can be replaced with concrete, does that make sense? That doesn't make sense to me. It seems like you'd remove the tripping hazard and then make sure it was just replaced within a reasonable time.
That makes sense to me.
does homeowners insurance usually cover sidewalk replacement?
We're not in the insurance business or
Well,
giving
I just-
insurance advice to any homeowner.
Well, I don't know if it usually covers that or if this is all going to be total cost just thrown directly on the homeowner.
My sidewalk got destroyed by the hailstorm.
I'm gonna guess an insurance company isn't going to repair a hazard. They may cover for an injury. So again, you talk about the time frame. If you're a property owner and you receive notice from the city that you have an unsafe hazard and you're bound to repair it, and you sit on it for a year, you're only increasing your liability as a homeowner. That's the reality of it. And we talked about, the public maintenance and versus a property responsibility. Again, we're a community. That's what we are. And, we get the question about why do we have to shovel our sidewalks? If we took that responsibility on as everything's on the city proper, the city government, that means we're responsible for shoveling everyone's sidewalk too. So, that's why we talk about what are the best practices that are established throughout. You may not like it. People don't like shoveling their sidewalks and use that same argument. Well, it's a city sidewalk, they should be doing it. Could you imagine that cost? If we go out and shovel everyone's sidewalk? Again, we are a community and that's some give and take within that.
It's gonna be a lot worse if I can't shovel it out in the street for the snowplow to take away since he pushed it up on my driveway. But that being said, the grinding I see on some sidewalks, is that done by the city or is that done by the homeowner? Some of the big lips on the east sidewalk in the city streets, is that,
Primarily, that's by the city.
that's what I figured?
Yep.
Because it's well done and marked.
Yeah, there's limitations on how much you can actually grind and,
Yeah.
it's gotten a little harder as time has gone on. We used to, just go in and grind it with our equipment, but that still doesn't necessarily meet ProAg. There's a certain distance that you have to make that taper over.
Right.
And then you start getting into issues with the thickness of the sidewalk. When you have that whole, 3 inches of a lip, there's really not much you can do to grind it all out and still have a good surface.
When we get notified of a hazard sidewalk, we typically will send a letter to the resident and notify them, and then they take advantage of the 50/50 program, and then we get it replaced, in a timely manner. We just recently ran up against 2 scenarios where that's not happening. We're not getting the participation. And that's what that was the motivation of bringing it forward to council, that in the past, we've always got people to participate with us in replacing those areas. but we're not at this point. So we have to move forward with another options, with following through with the code. So, for the most part, we don't ever have to go into the part where we require them to replace it because they're participating in our 50/50 program. So just so you know, just 2 in the years that we've worked here haven't done it, and that's just recently.
And as far as payment goes for it, they can also opt to do that on their taxes, assessed to their taxes over, how long was it?
8 year.
8 years. Yeah.
Yep.
And that's part of the 50/50 program or, okay, thanks.
But that provision for the assessment is also in the ordered, the new construction that can, I think it's a minimum of 5 or a maximum of 8 that can be assessed over in the code. Section B prohibits anyone from taking down barricades that the city engineer sets up. I don't currently barricade the sidewalk. If we're notified of a trip and fall, we spray the concrete joint to highlight the hazard. So we can, we currently would suggest striking part B. Section C allows the property owner to apply to the city engineer to have the street department make the repairs. We currently don't have a concrete crew, so we would suggest either striking or modifying part C, depending on how discussions go tonight. And section D allows us to bill the owner for the final quantities of work completed, and this would, again, would be the city doing the work. We basically do this process in the 50/50 that we'll look at later, so we would suggest striking part D or modifying part D, depending on how the discussions go tonight. So that takes us, I'm gonna have to, I messed up something here.
So if the sidewalk, if we ordered the sidewalk to be repaired or replaced and the homeowner doesn't do it, but we do it, and we give them the itemized bill, are we only giving them 50% of the bill or we give them the full bill?
So if they utilize the 50/50 program, then the public sidewalk would be 50% of the bill.
So but they can't retroactively use the 50/50 program if they weren't already.
That's, yeah, that would be a discussion for you guys tonight. We haven't had to apply this to someone that hasn't opted for the program. So, you know, we could still utilize the 50/50 program and pay for half of it, or we could assess the full cost of the property. However, council would like to proceed.
What about other aspects of the project? Say landscaping or,
Yeah, those are all costs that would be part of the construction. So, you know,
Yeah.
if it's attached to a curb, sometimes that requires some curb replacement or something like that.
Then with a known issue is, so we paint orange. Is that enough of it? I mean, if I have a 2.5 or a 3-inch tripper, is that really enough? I mean, juxtaposed to removing it.
It wouldn't meet ADA requirements, so yes.
Okay. I had to
Is that
use-
your
I had to use the
question,
word.
or was your
I had to-
question-
I just had to use the word.
So are,
Looked that up recently.
Imagine that.
So we
Sine
got
qua
some
non.
good scenarios to go through that might answer some questions too.
So in this next section of the presentation, we'd like to talk through some of the common scenarios that we work through concerning sidewalk maintenance and replacement in public works. Scenario 1 is a trip and fall that results in a claim against the city. So the picture at the top right is a trip and fall that occurred near the Blue Cow Car Wash. The single section of sidewalk seemingly subsided due to the original water service construction to the car wash. As you can see from the picture, staff painted the trip hazard following the trip and fall notification that we received. And honestly, if you've walked some of the older parts of town, you can see that's not much of a lip compared to a lot of the things that you see. The bottom right picture is of a sidewalk along 4th Ave East near 5th Street. The construction on 4th Ave East occurred in 2017 and included 14 blocks of water main replacement. New services were replaced to the edge of the right-of-way, meter pits installed in the boulevards. Now, the funding that we had was state revolving funds, and because of those funds, we couldn't replace anything on any sidewalk outside of what was required for the water services to be installed. The only sidewalk replaced on the project were at water services and also ADA ramps at intersections, because we're required to do that once we replace the street. 2 years following the project, a claim was submitted to the city and transferred to MMIA concerning a trip and fall and an injury on 4th Ave East. The fall occurred in a section of sidewalk not replaced by the project, which is shown in that bottom right picture. And then the lip, you can see, is a little, like, close to 1.5 inch lip that she got injured on. MMIA paid the claim because I and other staff should have been aware of the hazard in the sidewalk and should have followed the municipal code, as we discussed tonight, which would have included providing notice to the property owner to replace the sidewalk, barricading the sidewalk off, and following through with replacement in some manner. Currently, once we're notified of a trip and fall, we spray paint the hazard. We notify the property owner that the sidewalk needs to be replaced. We give them information on the 50/50 sidewalk replacement program. And if they take part in the program, we add them to the work order list.
So go back, MMIA paid the claim because we should have known. So in other words, we almost need Tim Klusner running around on a scooter looking at this stuff.
Well, I think, and Keith, correct me if I'm wrong, but they're saying that we were in that area doing the street replacement, utility replacement.
Should have seen it when we were there.
Is that
Yeah,
the
that's
accurate?
exactly what it was. I was asked the question, did you walk up and down the sidewalks during the project? Yes, I did. Did you notice this?
Other side.
You know, I don't remember it, but,
Yeah.
and then it was also not just me, but also they asked if the streets crew was out there, the water meter crew, the parks crew, so it wasn't just the engineering staff.
So with this example down here in the bottom, you've got 2 sections that are lifted. The repair for that, what would it be, just those 2 sections? You take those out, flatten it, and just pour those, or does it go like to the sidewalk, the intersecting sidewalk, or how is that determined?
Yeah, you have to go back to where you can make it ADA compliant usually, but
So this would go all the way to the street?
it depends. Depends
Oh,
on if
okay.
we can, you know, if the cross slope is under 2%, you know, if there's it's a 1/4 inch is what ADA requires for, anything over a 1/4 inch is a tripping hazard. So, we would have to just go back until we can find a place that we can tie it in.
Oh,
You do the least amount
sure, right.
necessary. I mean, you don't want to, I mean, you limit the cost wherever you could.
Our regulatory limits really on sidewalks, we go back to ADA. So we try to match into those ADA requirements.
Does ADA bring any funding with it? No.
No.
And sometimes we actually have to,
That's
Silly,
my
Jed.
question.
we have to warp it in some places to match existing because, you know, we can replace a full frontage of somebody's property, but we're not going to go into the next property owner's sidewalk that, you know, it's just.
But what
off
if
a
you're
little
there?
Slope or something. Yeah, maybe we should.
Yeah.
If you're there and-
Yeah.
Like-
Sometimes you just have to have discretion and judgment on when projects start and stop.
So that's scenario number 1.
Oh, wait, we go back. What happened on the Blue Cow one? Did we have to pay?
There's a
on
claim, I
that?
believe we paid on it too.
And why, do you remember?
All
We
injury.
were, somehow, we should have been aware of it. Was
Washed
the
the city
conclusion,
vehicle.
so then we had to pay out on it.
I believe that's the case. I know there was a claim and I didn't review that one in detail. The 4th Ave was about 26,000 was the the bill, and our deductible's 15, so. You know, the insurance paid
15,000 or 1,500?
15,000. So another type of scenario would be a trip and fall notification only, and we do get quite a few of those. I just kept that highlighted text because it applies to all of these. If the city should have been aware of the condition of the sidewalk and sidewalk was not ADA compliant, the city's at risk. So in these situations, we'll review and document hazards at the site. We'll contact the property owner. We'll send them a letter that identifies the hazard and their responsibilities for maintenance, and then provide the 50/50 program as an option for that repair or replacement. I said at the bottom of this, and that was incorrect. As a trip and fall, these work orders are prioritized. We actually just, as those come in, we put them at the bottom of the pile. And so, because there's a lot of bad sidewalks out there that are also tripping hazards that are coming into that 50/50 program. So it doesn't necessarily make sense just to move them back down the list. Situation 3 is the one that prompted tonight's discussion. These are both on 4th Ave West. This scenario are two sides of the same street. We met with a property owner on a trip and fall around the corner on 4th Street West, I think. And then that property owner brought us over to take a look at these ones that are just as bad or worse. So then we followed up with the property owners. These two properties have been notified multiple times in multiple years and have yet to be responsive.
This is where we will now bring the issue to Doug, who then brings it to council, because at this point, the sidewalks need to be replaced. So we would move forward with the city replacing them and then assessing the property owners.
So next, we just wanted to go through the 50/50 program. We'll get into the funding, kind of what the intent was. Initially, the program was focused on replacement of existing sidewalks in the downtown tax increment district using $75,000 of non-program funds in 1996. Then $25,000 were allocated for fiscal years 1998 through 2002, at which point the sum was to be reduced to $15,000 a year. In 2002, a new program would split the cost for the sidewalk replacement with property owners using $50,000 for the first year and funding to be determined for future years. I just took some text out of the resolutions for those. That's us beside that 2002, and that brings us to 2024. We really haven't made any changes. We're currently using $50,000 a year for the 50/50 program with $25,000 budgeted for ADA. And when we say ADA, that's really the ADA ramps at the intersections. So Department of Justice requires us, when we replace asphalt in the street, we have to upgrade the ADA ramps. So it's a big cost to all of our street projects. And we utilize the concrete bid to do that work. At the left side of this is our last year's bid for the 50/50 program. The prices vary on the scope of the project, so the bigger the project, the lower the cost per unit, I guess. Each site also includes items such as removals, like you were talking, Chad, irrigation work, landscaping. There's labor by the hour. That would be for tree roots that need to be removed or some special work that's associated with that sidewalk work. And then we use the same bid schedule for our streets department, water department, and sewer department for utility work. If we replace a service line and have to remove a chunk of sidewalk, we utilize that same bid process or the bid schedule to issue work orders to get those corrections made.
How realistic are those figures now?
We haven't gotten this year's bid yet, but typically what we see is 5% increase per year. So they're not too far out.
It's typically one contractor that you get for those, right?
Yeah,
You go out to bid, somebody steps forward, okay.
yeah. Currently, the 50/50 program requires 50 to 75% of one engineer's time to administer during construction season, and that'd be from about May to November. So I just wanted to go through those steps real quick. Step one, residents would contact Public Works and request participation. This would be for one that wasn't already a trip and fall. Two, engineering staff would inspect the sidewalk to determine qualification. Sometimes we'll get a request and there's a single hairline crack in a chunk of sidewalk that is not a, tripping hazard, and we won't add that into the program. If qualified, field measurements and photos are taken. Step three, the engineering staff prepares a cost estimate and delivers the cost estimate to the property owner with a consent form. The owner then decides if they want to participate in the program. If yes, they sign the consent form and provide that back to us. When it's signed, the engineering staff prepares a work order and delivers it to the contractor. The contractor then has 30 days from receipt of the work order to complete the work and must complete the work in 7 days from the start of work. Engineering staff goes out, marks the removals in the field with spray paint. The contractor completes the work. Engineering staff measures the constructed quantities and prepares summaries for the completed work. If the owner chose to pay their portion in full upon completion, the contractor bills the owner directly and the city pays their portion of the bill. If the owner chose the 8-year assessment, the contractor is paid in full by the city and the owner's information is provided to the finance department to be assessed, and that's coordinated with the county. Step 10, engineering staff sends the owner maintenance information, and we start the warranty period at the end of the construction season. So what that looks like in real life, this is a 3rd Ave East project. I'm having a hard time seeing it because I made it so small on my screen here. So the first is the consent for construction. They went out, as we said, they verified it meets the requirements. And notice the pink portions on that bottom picture. That's the approach sidewalk to the resident on the street side and also on the private property side. We allow that to be completed as part of the project, but they have to pay 100% of those costs that aren't part of the public pedestrian corridor. This next step would then be using those same pictures and quantities that we developed to issue a work order for the contractor. And then finally, after the work's done, go out, remeasure, and get the final quantities and total cost split out.
So if you go back to that slide, you can see kind of the typical cost. How many panels is that? 4 panels?
There's 167, so like 3.5.
3.5 panels.
I think they're 6 foot wide on that one.
The owner paid for that, what, $538?
$538.50 was our portion, and then the owner had $707.90 of the private portions, and then the other $538. So they paid like $1,200
Yep.
for that work.
But if they were just to do the sidewalk, it would have been $538.
Yeah.
Pretty reasonable when all things said and done for a few panels of sidewalk.
So we wanted to go through some of the successes, limitations, and Other items, the program's been in place for 20 years plus, and we have had a lot of work orders issued through that program. As we discussed earlier, the ADA ramp improvements are also made as part of the 50/50 project. So if we're working on a corner lot and we're replacing sidewalk up to what would be an ADA ramp, most of the time we also replace that ADA ramp, unless we know that that curb needs to be replaced with a future street project for drainage or something, then we'll hold off. Some of the limitations, funds can't be used for infill sidewalk. We get a lot of calls for new sidewalk and we can't use it for that. It's only for maintenance and replacement. We have issues with contractor scheduling. These work orders are typically fill-in work for the contractor, so when they're between bigger projects, they'll drop back and do these work orders. Prioritization, often our city projects are prioritized because the panels and curb has been removed and it's at a greater hazard, or the work is time sensitive for a project. If we're like working in the highway or something like that where we have time constraints, prioritize those. In the last couple of years, we've had 68 new projects. And this is, keep in mind, a limitation. Only 30 of those were completed. And that adds a lot of frustration to property owners because if they're on the list for work and then they get carried until the next season, the costs increase. And so the reason for that is, like Councilman Fisher had mentioned, we've only had one contractor bid on this project successfully. Since I've been here for going on 12 years, it's been the same contractor that's gotten this every year. We have had other contractors bid on it, larger outfits, and their costs were way more to do this work.
Substantially more.
So that's a problem. We do have LDs in our contract, but we don't want to disenfranchise our one bidder because we need we need the that same contractor to do our own work. So that's been a struggle for us, how to balance that out. Other challenges for the administration, just being the liaison between the contractor and the property owner, because the contractor, they have other priorities as well, and the property owners, their main focus is getting that done. And it can be hard when we can't make it happen. Time to get through the program. We've had some of these take 2 or 3 years to get through the program. The original intent, as far as I can tell, was to assist residential property owners with maintenance when they can't afford it by themselves. The first, when this was initiated, it was really focused on commercial, but with the 50/50 program, it seems the intent was more for residential. Often we get requests from businesses and other public entities, and so we try to keep that. If it's say the county, for example, we will put that kind of towards the end of the list so that if we have monies remaining, we'll do that as a bigger project. They're usually big projects, bigger projects. HOAs can be a struggle. Often they are doing one panel here and one panel there throughout their entire HOA, and just the cost to do the limited amount of work isn't, in my mind, a good use of the funds because we're just spending so much on little individual sites. And then some of the worst areas in the city don't participate in the program. They usually do if we go out and give them a letter, but they're not coming in on their own if you've walked around in the older part of town. We use competitive bidding, but we usually only get one bid. The municipal contracts require prevailing wages, workman's comp, insurance, and bonding. We sometimes hear that the homeowners can contract the work cheaper if they can contract the work for themselves, which we allow them to do if they want to contract it themselves. But typically they're saying, how about I have my contractor do it and you pay half of their cost? And so that gets into some questions of legalities. So some of the ideas that we have, staff could prioritize and select larger sections, kind of as Mr. Councilman Fisher was saying, that need to be replaced and notify the adjacent property owners per the code. The project could utilize the 50/50 bid prices, but each adjacent property owner would have to be assessed for the full project cost because we have limitations on the scope of the projects that we can use those funds for. The project could also be bid separately, so not using the 50/50 bid prices. So we could just go out, solicit for bids for a larger project. But again, the adjacent property owners would have to bear the full cost of the work. As I mentioned, we've had requests from property owners to utilize their own contractor at a cheaper rate and split the smaller bill with the city. And we just don't know. We'd have to work with the city attorney to work through some of those things, but have concerns that that's not possible as a way to spend city funds for those reasons that we already mentioned. We've talked about potentially having a small 3-person crew in the street department that would only do concrete, and then we could potentially do these type of 50/50 projects with our own staff. And what we see on the street side of things is, we pave streets at, a quarter of the cost or less than what we have, if we hired it out, if it's contract work. So that leads us to the council discussion and some requests for direction. We plan on working with the city attorney and other applicable staff to develop updates to the municipal code to present at a regular session of council or to schedule additional work sessions. Thought we'd talk about sidewalk infill. There are tools in the municipal code to do infill. We've heard that a lot in the past. It would be nice to make some of these connections that make sense. So that construction could be ordered, but that'd have to come from council. And then, any ideas or discussion on the 50/50 program, some of the limitations that we have there, issues that we're seeing. And that's it.
I think item 1, seems pretty straightforward. Thoughts on that, updating code?
Just a question, this will come to legal too, with your mention of some homeowners want to utilize funds on their own. Does the $50,000, any balance that's left over in there, roll over to the next year?
Yeah.
Would it be reasonable to say that that's the given amount, and if there's some rollover due to time constraints or contractor availability, that amount could be used for some other method of funding to get more done?
So our street assessment monies per state code, we can only replace a certain length of sidewalk with those funds. So we can't do big projects with street assessment monies.
Okay.
As Doug kind of mentioned earlier, we could create a sidewalk assessment or a sidewalk district, and then we could use that funding mechanism, but the current funding that we have right now doesn't allow us to do large sidewalk projects.
Understood.
Every year we've talked about every time we've talked about the parks, trails, district, and it's come up, twice probably in the last 6 years. We've included a portion for infill and for replacement and exactly doing that. So it would completely change that. Now it would require the election of a trails district. And that would be a citywide component where you would look at, I can't remember the percentages we had, but 25% towards maintenance of existing sidewalks, 25% for infill, 50% for trail maintenance, construction, anything that council would want to do proportionate wise. But, that's been included in both the times we've brought that forward per request of the council. And obviously, different items have taken precedence over that.
Thank you.
Can you go back to the list again? 1, 2, 3 items?
Oh,
We don't switch that. I think that's.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, there we go.
So I just want to kind of knock through these because we can get in philosophical discussions on different things, but one, is there anything within one that, or does it seem pretty straightforward?
It's fine.
The
That seems pretty
adjustments?
straightforward, yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Sidewalk infill, you know, this is where we're now starting to get in to the conversation of, you know, assessments, et cetera. Was it 5 years ago, 6 years ago, we did the street tree assessment and really bulked that up, Mr. Russell? Longer ago. Might have been 8 years. I think
Yeah, I'm not,
Frida was on council when we did that.
I'm not sure when that was passed, but it's been probably a good 5 years.
And I guess the question would be, is that, I mean, we've had relative success with that. Is that we just kind of see that as an ongoing allocation of money to maintain what we have for trees and everything else, correct? We don't see that sunsetting.
The urban
The street
forestry?
tree, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's not.
Because what I'm
Hasn't
looking
been
at is,
discussed.
okay, as we look at talking about assessments, you know, I mean, we just got a pretty big levy passed, so. Want to be cognizant of this. So when we look at this, I guess the first thought that came to my mind, you know, I want to look at the infill, the order. I mean, us being the heavy-handed, you will put in a sidewalk. We have a lot of neighborhoods that don't have sidewalks. We'd love to have them in, but I really struggle with, you know, looking at someone and saying, you will put this in.
Another aspect of this, and it falls more in line with the curb, we recently had somewhat of a claim, I guess, from a property owner on Wyoming, West Wyoming Street, that recently bought his house maybe a year or two ago, basement floods. He believes that's from the street runoff. The south side of that street doesn't have curb on his frontage, and he believes that the city's at fault. Of course, we haven't done anything with that street for 20 years probably.
40 years.
But
It's an old road.
this would be an instance where that curb could be ordered in, and the property owners could then pay for their frontage of that curb. It's a tool that we have that otherwise it's, you know, where do we get the funds for the curb?
Seems a little retaliatory, but
Well,
could have that impression.
But it would be following code.
But we'd be following code, and the other side of this is, if that truly was the issue, then at that point, you
Yeah.
gotta cure it.
And kind of going back, I think, to Councilman Dahlman's concerns on, you know, the costs being paid by the property owner. With our new development, all the sidewalk and curbing goes in with the street, and then those costs are associated with the parcel cost as it's sold. And that's, I think, why this was set up the way it was with the 50/50. It's only for replacement of existing sidewalk and curb, but if new sidewalk or curb goes in, you know, that would be the adjacent property owner's cost. You know, potentially they bought a lot at a lower cost because it didn't have some of those street improvements.
That's, yeah, the general theory behind.
Counselor Dahlman has her hand raised.
Ms. Dahlman?
Oh, thank you. So I would be wanting to look into see how maybe we could have our city attorney possibly work around you know, like if a property owner is like, well, let me have my contractor do it. And I know you said that gets to be sticky, but it seems like, you know, with all these delays and all of these costs, you know, going up, it seems like that might be an option to kind of look at. So I would be in favor of that. And then if sidewalks are technically public property, couldn't we designate them all as trails? And so they're trails in public land? And couldn't some of our marijuana tax go to that?
I'm
I
sorry.
mean, that's
I'm sorry.
stretching that really far, but
No, Councilman Dahlman, can you repeat that as talking with the city attorney during that period? Last part I heard was you're talking about using other funds for the repair and maintenance?
well, I was thinking, some property owners are saying, well, can I just have my contractor do it? And then, it was said that that gets to be kind of sticky with the city. Well, I think that that might be an option maybe we could look at a little further, maybe make it less sticky. I don't know.
Okay, I heard that portion, then I missed what you said right before the marijuana tax. You said something about marijuana tax.
Converting
I
all
said-
trails, saying they're all trails.
I said, since all of these sidewalks are considered public property, public land, can't we designate them as trails and then use some of our marijuana tax for it?
Well, I wouldn't worry about where you classify the funds coming from. The question is, do you want to take over that maintenance responsibility and put it as a responsibility that essentially this council is taking liability for and taking responsibility for it on a citywide basis? And again, that's why it's set up how it is. And you heard Keith talk about, essentially everyone's paying for those sidewalks on that initial development type component. The marijuana tax just on that just goes into the general fund, just like any of our property tax revenues. So basically you'd be using property taxes or a substitute for to do this work anyway. So it's going to be coming from the public in some fashion, even if the city takes it over. Now, in your question about using alternate contracting, we can take a deeper look into it. It's one of those things that we just have to take a deeper look into it, of what that would mean.
And also, I had a question a really long time ago. My hand was up, but I didn't. Nobody looked and saw, and I should just speak up. But I mean, is there a possibility that like a homeowner could actually do this themselves?
Yeah, they definitely could. They would have to get a right-of-way permit, and that requires insurance. It's the 1 million, 3 million insurance that we referenced earlier. And then there's a bonding component to the right-of-way permit as well that they'd have to provide.
And is that cost prohibitive?
We've had some property owners that are contractors and felt competent to do the work, and we've worked with them to make sure that they're meeting the city standards, and so yeah, certain property owners that feel competent to do that certainly can.
And certain property owners that feel competent to do things are like all of those standards written out so they know exactly what to do. Is that easy to find, easy to do, easy to navigate?
Yeah, they're all in our city standards. So we have typical details that specify, the concrete strength and the air entrainment requirement and slump requirements for concrete. So they would be able to order the concrete as they need it, and we would verify their grades prior to placement.
There probably is a little skill and education that would have to go with. I mean, no, they couldn't just go rip out the sidewalk without having the public works being involved in the process.
Mr. Down?
So going back to the 1, 2, 3 list here, number one, I think we all have agreed on, the staff just makes the appropriate changes and brings it back to us to vote on. Number 3 seems like a work session in and of itself, taking a deep dive into the 50/50 program and seeing if we want to make any changes there. Number 2 is a much larger issue that probably would take multiple work sessions. We're not going to solve anything tonight, but that's something we've been talking about here on council for years. And the number one problem there is finding a funding source for it, right? We want the sidewalks in. We don't want to go and be tyrannical until the homeowner, you're gonna put a sidewalk in when the city never did long ago when it required new construction there. So, I think that is, as far as priorities of getting these things done, I think we do number one, we do number three at a work session, and then number two is a long-term discussion.
I think 2A kind of goes into 1. Because one of the things that you're looking at is some of that language that we're looking at changing is, right now, we can order
Right.
these to be done.
Sure. And I think, we can probably make a pretty quick decision on whether we want to pursue that or not tonight. For the first bullet under 2, I think we could probably give staff a consensus that, whether we want to proceed with that or not. And for the rest of the stuff, we're going to have to work
Well,
through.
and I think philosophically thinking or speaking, yeah, Mr. Dowd, yeah, we don't want to make anyone do it. But then if I hear of a situation where, yeah, we have an issue and needs to be addressed, and the best way is to have this done for the good of everybody,
And two different issues,
and 2 different issues.
infill versus repair and maintenance.
Right.
Sure.
Well, I'll help out on number 2. I'm for the 8-year assessment.
Again, this is when you're basically ordering new sidewalks.
Oh, that would be
in.
for infill.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
You
whole,
could also order, new curb line also as a part of that.
yeah.
So I'm totally fine with if the lack of curb and gutter and sidewalk is causing a problem that's going to end up costing the city more. On an individual basis, we look at those and say, okay, then we're going to do the sidewalk thing, and I don't have any problem with having that added to an assessment. But for the hundreds of other pieces of sidewalk that are missing, I don't think we're going to solve that with ordering it. I think we'll get,
Well, there's another
some flack
component to
about that.
infill though, which is, there's a safety component to infill as well. And we've heard it a lot when we were talking about the parking district. I think it was around that time when it comes to people having to walk in the road instead of on the sidewalk because there is no sidewalk. There's that maybe to kind of consider as well.
Yeah.
When thinking about that.
That's typically tends to be more of a general area issue.
Right.
That would be more than just ordering 50 homeowners to put in sidewalks.
Yeah.
That's what I don't see as,
Yeah, well, the other part of this is, if we were looking at any kind of larger solution for infill, we'd have to take it to the people anyway, right? We can't just say, okay, now we have a district. I mean, they have to actually vote for that, correct?
If you go the route of taking on that cost within the city of Kalispell organization.
Well, if we were looking for a tax increment district or whatever it's called for the sidewalks, that would be up to the
improvement.
voters, right?
Yeah, an assessment district.
Yeah, assessment district, yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff to talk about with infill, and, it's going to be a long discussion, especially if all of our other councilmen are here for that session. But I don't think that I've heard any appetite for the first bullet point in mass. I mean, only in certain circumstances where it could be either a safety or a continual maintenance problem. And at that point, I would be cool with the 8-year assessment, being associated with that. But, I think we can't just, if we put something in place that will solve a lack of sidewalk problem, there's going to be a whole bunch of pressure to do that in certain areas. And then a whole bunch of pressure against doing that with the property owners. So that's something I think we should look at pretty closely.
Yeah,
Come back.
yeah. So what I'm getting takeaway and is work on the updates to code, kind of streamline some of the process along the current process, essentially what it is. Like, eliminate the coming to the council to order. If we have a hazard that we're aware of, continue on that process with notification, but no need to come back to council is what we'd recommend, and then just following through with that on our own process. Look at modifications to 50/50 that may seem reasonable through either acts of construction, extension of assessments. Hold off on any big sidewalk infill orders.
Yeah, and
Is what I'm hearing.
in the meantime, for those, if there's a need,
A
bring it to
safety
council.
or a risk,
Yeah,
liability hazard.
yep.
Is that along the lines of what
Yep,
you're hearing
we
down
can do
there?
that. Okay.
Mr. Fisher.
Thank you. I think that's a really good overview, kind of what I'm feeling as well. But it would also be interesting for parks or public works to see if there's any more money available with inflation. They're dealing with the same costs. I know that we're probably not always getting them all done, 30 out of 90 projects or something, but maybe a little public education program, a little more money thrown to it. Maybe we can deal with a few more liabilities if there's a funding mechanism without going for a special vote or more. I understand what you said, Mr. Mayor, on what this community has already done for us, but it would be nice to deal with a few more liabilities out there if there's any funding mechanism available, and maybe even considering 60/40, where we have a little more skin in the game, unless that makes us more liable in some way. But it would be nice to promote this a little better, because it is a very good program that is used by many people that can make our safety issues a lot less out there, and the homeowners a lot less safety issues. It would be nice to see a little more money thrown. Everything costs more. Be nice to give a little better run at it.
It's the question I've got, kind of looking at the other side of this is we have one bidder, always, and they have capacity issues. I mean, we talked about, here you put in that bullet point, 3-man crew, 4-man crew, whatever it is. And I just kind of question, okay, if we look at those numbers, would we really be more efficient than the bid numbers? And I don't know that we would, because we'd probably end up having to, well, now we need a dump truck, now we need I don't know, we might need more equipment.
We were, if we got some positive feedback on that, then we would take the next step to really dive into some of those details as a part of that. Staffing wise, in the street fund, we do need to increase staff for winter season tasks. So having more in the summer to offset some of that would be a pretty good give and take there. So we're gonna need more staff anyway in the street fund, as we kind of reviewed the last time we were in front of council. So designating 3 for sidewalk and then having them help us in the plowing in the wintertime, that's kind of a win-win in some ways.
Well, if we look at the complete, yearly funds that we put towards the 50/50 replacement program, that only covers 1 FTE maybe.
Right.
So it doesn't cover 3.
Yep.
So I just don't see that as I'd love to be able to get more contractors involved so that we have some competition and some extra availability out there. But I don't know. I just don't see it as feasible right now, especially with everything that's hitting the taxpayers currently. So
Well, that's because that's exactly what I was looking at, Mr. Dowd. We did 30 and figure average cost, $1,500.
Yeah, I would say
Maybe a little
too,
bit more, but a couple $1,000s, you're gonna be $60,000 at best if you could do 30 of them, and this is what it would cost
yeah.
if we hired it out.
And those were the 50/50
Just all
work orders.
material
We do
costs.
have a lot of other work orders that are done by that.
Done by
same-
that same,
yeah.
right, so I
That's
guess
just
that
being-
would be the other question is
Yeah.
with that other work, and that's what I was gonna get to is when you look at your ADA ramps, you look at all the other things that come through,
Mm-hmm.
is there room, does it make sense, does it actually save us money long-term?
Yeah, and I couldn't answer that right now.
Right.
Again, we were just thinking of ideas also as a part of that, so
I
it might
just-
not work out.
just to be super clear though, I already have this in my head. As soon as you mentioned that, I was like, well, if we did that, I know that it would be done faster, better, and I know the streets department does a great job. I just don't see it being, it's definitely not fund neutral to add that section. Just from the big strategic overview look at it.
I think we will continue to struggle to only have 50% of the work orders coming in completed every summer, just because of the contracting environment. It's kind of where we're always going to be at. So we have a lot of interest. It's just we can only accomplish so much each summer, and a lot of that has to do with contracting. So if we wanted to do more, having a city staff to help do those projects, we could do more in that aspect. But we can look into that too. But it's just kind of where we're at.
That would be a good, good trade school vocation to pick up.
There you go.
On a side note, Keith and Catherine and I have talking about other funding. There is other grants out there that potentially would qualify for infill that we're starting to look at, that ultimately they'll be due they are competitive, but look at potentially coming forth with some of those once we kind of sort out how they fit into everything.
Clear as mud.
It's great.
Okay. Any public comment?
I honestly didn't plan on staying for this, but it has been brought up quite a few times in some of our development projects. Just talking with Shane back there. One potential thing to just throw out there, I've brought it up with Jared and Keith on my 3 Mile project. Once we started diving into that, realizing how much gap there was from 3 Mile to Meridian, it was shocking. So through some of the PUD process, where as developers we look at it that, if you're asking for something, you got to give something back. So maybe something to consider is, I hate to use the word incentivizing because that's not really what it is, but as a mechanism where we are obligated through that process to give something back. I threw out and said, well, why don't I just go and infill all that sidewalk? We obviously have all of the capability, the insurances, the bonding, everything to be able to do so. Now that's on a project out towards our own project, but I don't know why it would have to be dictated by that if it was something that, say, prioritizing certain areas that get targeted because of the violations. I've been a part of those. They're not pretty, and we always lose, always. So the trips, the broken legs, the broken wrists, the broken everything, it costs real money. But when you think about sidewalks, you're kind of mentioning, trade school. I think part of why you're only getting one bid, one factor, would be the prevailing wage. I think it should be some serious consideration on what it takes from the legality side of things as the city. Obviously, you got to be protected, but I think there would be other qualified sources out there to provide that bidding should that be modified a little bit. But for us, like the one that popped into my head sitting back there was, I think it would be an awesome win-win when you're looking at the PUD approval process with the developer to say, okay, part of your approval is going to be the replacement of, you can quantify a sidewalk. Now we can argue about what the costs are. We were just doing the math back there on what prevailing wage numbers look like versus what we would do that for. There is a savings. No different than you guys saying that your street crews can pave the street cheaper than going out. We can do the same thing. So it might turn into a real win-win if the legality was there to be able to do so, where the contractor could go in, say, over on Fifth Street and replace 150 feet of sidewalk. We're doing it anyways, whether it's on our project or not, but just something to throw out there.
You're not necessarily offering to pay for it, you're just take advantage of the contractor rate, is what you're saying.
No, I mean, seriously, through the PUD, like when you look at it, that if you've got parkland designation, not that you're trying to sacrifice something else to acquire that, but there's lots of times where we're looking at the give and take of something and saying, okay, instead of doing this on the project right now, maybe you guys, would your company go in and on your dime replace all the sidewalks? The 3 mile example was when I started doing the math, I was like, that's $100,000 worth of sidewalks. If I got to go put in $100,000 park here, it doesn't mean that I shouldn't put in the park at some point. But when you got a multi-phase project that you said, if that approval happened now, I'd go pay that $100,000 to go do the sidewalks. Right. So it could be on our dime.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
I wasn't. I'm Shane Jacobs. I own a business at 36 2nd Street East. I wasn't planning on speaking on this topic either, but it is something that's been a little bit of a thorn in my side, just mainly the 50/50 program. I'm an architect. I do a lot of public work, so I understand public money, public procurement. MCA is a beast, Montana Code Annotated. And I just wanted to share that more on one occasion on some private projects I've experienced that challenge with clients saying, wait a minute, this is a prevailing wage job, and all of a sudden the sidewalk project is more expensive than if I would have just had it done myself, so I'll just do it myself. And so I feel like that kind of guts or undermines the idea of it being 50/50. So I wonder if there isn't some other way to go about it, and it might be it might be something in, because I'm sure it's public money is probably the problem, that you're just handing it out without bidding it, right? And I think there's a couple challenges in there too of having multiple contractors on the site at the same time. That's also a challenge. So if a private entity is developing a project and then there's sidewalks that interface it, and city's got to go get a contractor out there. So 2 contracts in there, kind of a hot mess with both just scopes and schedules. But I'm wondering if maybe part of the solution isn't, I think there's an $80,000 threshold for public contracts. And if you're under that, I don't think you need to go out to public bid. So that might be something to take a peek at, and maybe you'll blow up my idea.
I'm researching it right now, just for everybody's awareness. I'm looking at it. I will research it some more. I will hopefully have an answer for you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Hi, my name is Jaden Weppel. I'm a resident of Kalispell over on 1122nd 4th Street West. I guess I just wanted to say that when I was here mostly just to hear a little bit about how the Charles Hotel and parking garage is coming along. Thank you for your presentation. That I, as a member of the public, am in favor of hopefully giving them an extension, whether that's 3 years or 5. I think that certainly gets Kalispell closer to some of the visions that it has outlined, and it's like trying to get Kalispell where we want it to be, or where the public wants it to be by 2035. I think that is something that can still happen, even if we have that delay, so long as something happens in 3 or 5 years. And so I just wanted to speak in favor of that. And though I am not public en masse, I would say that to your comment, like their sidewalk infill, I live in a part of Kalispell that doesn't have much for sidewalk. And if one of the goals of the Kalispell plan is, as I'm reading here, in our values, to make Main Street a more friendly place for pedestrians, as well as motorists and like all the rest, a part of that is having more reliable and constant parking, as would a sidewalk, as would a parking garage supply, but also having some way to get to downtown as a pedestrian. You don't need as many parking spots if, I living on 4th can safely walk over here rather than having to drive. And obviously that's not something that's going to be sorted out in any time soon, but if that's an idea that, council is interested in looking and working towards, I think that work sessions towards that goal would be valuable for both the city and at the very least for me as a resident. So thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Hello, Council. My name is Gracelyn Abel. I also live in the same neighborhood, in the same house as Jaden Whipple. I grew up here. I remember totally biting it on a sidewalk, riding my bike as a young child. I understand technically not supposed to ride your bike on the sidewalk, but we don't have biking infrastructure downtown. I remember taking my grandmother, who is a bit of a klutz. Sorry, Grandma. And she has trouble with the sidewalks and lifting her feet, and several of my other relatives over time living here. So I think supporting better sidewalks and replacement as well as infill is important. And I also am in support of the Charles Hotel and the parking garage with multi-family dwellings above. I'm always proud of my city and living in Kalispell, and I would like to keep seeing downtown grow so that I don't have to drive clear to Whitefish to experience any sort of nightlife or whatnot. I'd like to see that in my hometown too. So that's what I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you. No one online? Okay. Well, thank you. That's probably the most public comment we've received since we told people they had to wear masks when they sat in here, when we all had to wear masks, and way more civil. So I appreciate that. Mr. Russell, city manager report, and I'll just let you know it's 9:30, not 8:30. Just looking.
I'm just going to take a few minutes to collect my thoughts.
Okay, good.
So first item, as everyone here is aware, the dedicated emergency responder levy passed. Anticipate those results being certified April 2nd by the county commission. But that starts a whole bunch more work in terms of the implementation, which we're working on already. We're looking at advertising for positions and putting that out as early as possible. Normally, when we add staff, we wait till we get the final valuations and adopt the final budget in August at the second meeting. But as a dedicated levy, we know that revenue is going to come in, so we will look at hiring come July 1, and if not, needing to bridge it earlier just to get those boots on the street and put what the community passed into place. It'll also mean some other things. We may need to reevaluate some other additional forecasts and plans, but more to come on that later as we get into budget related stuff. But good problems to have from that end. So definitely appreciate the community's participation in that vote. Coming up, work session wise, April 8th, we'll revisit solid waste and had a request for an update on the MAID, I think that's what it is, the 382 lawsuit. So we'll look at that on April 8th. Work session on the 22nd. We'll be looking at coming back with the streets. When we left it off related to that assessment, is to come back with options on what that could mean for different levels of service related to the cost of inflation. And that's where I referenced earlier, we may be able to defer some of those costs into the future, but yet still do the same amount of work by incorporating them into the plans for our urban renewal areas, which all had improvements in our utilities, streets, drainage in there. And we could maybe focus on those for a few years while we gradually increase that assessment component on into the future. So it may just be able to defer some of that initial impact later on. And go through that report on the 22nd. Then just a couple quick updates. We've been working ever since we got the authorization to approve or to purchase the white track from council, probably close to a year ago now, from BNSF, just Western Region. We're supposed to close in February. Numerous emails. We've gone to different contacts of BNSF to try and get it moving forward. We are still working on it to get that project moving forward. We just cannot get it to close.
Need me to make a phone call?
We'll see. You know, we've gone up further. You know, it's just been a frustrating avenue. We have a long list of an email chain of, hey, where are we at? With no response. Where are we at? With no response. So keep you updated. And then the last one, meeting with the county later this week to follow up on establishment of the agreement between the city and the county for the opioid governance structure for funds that would come from the state that would be distributed through a competitive grant application by other entities. So just wanted to follow up on those items for council, and that's all I have.
We reported back on the Department of Transport, the money from the spending bill from the federal, 3.5 million.
Oh, yeah, it's good. So we've put out that, we actually, I can't remember so many emails. Put out that we anticipate receiving the appropriation request for 2 Mile Drive, which again, big thing was on the sidewalks on 2 Mile Drive, big discussion point. So we put in that for the appropriation. I know I put out an email that we anticipated that being funded. It looks like we should receive that appropriation. They weren't sure when deadline would be. They gave we'd receive those funds. Some said maybe as early as 60 days. Some said maybe 9 months. We're going to plan on that as a summer 2005 project, but it looks like we're going to get that. Yeah,
Not 2005.
2025.
Got it.
But I know Congressman Zinke's coming out to meet with the mayor and Susie and myself for the award of that. So we're looking at about 3.3 million, I think, that's been appropriated for that project out there to improve drainage, sidewalks, some reconstruction of the street. So, that's ways we look at being able to hit some of the infills with other alternative funding sources. So, yeah, thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, okay. Anything from council? Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm sure you're all seeing an email from a business owner down south, concerns about how the Highway 93 corridor south of the courthouse is looking, from gravel on the sidewalks, weeds, trash, with the feeling that it's turning into something that he does not want to see. I wanted to acknowledge that we're receiving that, and maybe ask Mr. Russell. I know there's a whole mix of county-owned, state issues with the right-of-way, some city involvement down there, but I guess kind of what I wanted to hone in on a little bit tonight is I'm impressed with the Downtown Business Association. There's nothing like that down there or other parts of town. What would it take for this particular longtime business owner to make something like that happen down in that corridor on Highway 93 South?
Yeah, so just in a cursory review, I think it's a 60%, a petition of 60% of the landowner by square footage. So I think if someone brought in a petition that they wanted to establish a business improvement district to address some of those concerns, and you're exactly right, some of the things that we're talking about really is outside municipal ordinance. We don't have beautification ordinances. We have landscape ordinance for the installation, but we don't have anything for maintenance of those long-term, and that you have to keep it up and you have to do these things. So a lot of those really fall outside ordinance. Now, on some of those concerns that are expressed, that we just requested he calls in and give us the specific address, because as you see, we are a complaint-driven process. We don't have a code enforcement that goes out and does, looks at everything all throughout the city. We just don't have those resources. And until we do, it's a complaint driven. So we just And our departments has spoken with that individual, just call it in on a specific address so we can go out and review, does that meet where we're at for any type of a nuisance abatement component? But in terms of, what the downtown did is to address a lot of the things that he was talking about, overall beautification, other property owners letting it go, and using his words in it. If they have that concern, he's certainly able to bring forward a petition with, again, a 60% approval of establishing a business improvement district for what they would want to see and what they would want to engage. Like, I think the downtown business improvement district was $100 flat fee per property plus 1.5 cents per square foot on an annual basis as a levy. And that was determined by them. That's what they said, we only want to charge ourselves. But then they also own a lot of those efforts. They own the flowers, they own, a lot of the trash pickup throughout that district that they do on private parcels. And it's just part of their agreement within the district. So anyone in any district certainly has that ability to come forward if they have the support of their neighborhood.
Thank you very much, sir. I appreciate it.
Mr. Graham, anything tonight? Nope. Anyone online have anything? Okay, I think just a couple quick, really one quick comment on, what I want to do is I want to thank the public, everybody who voted for the levy or, voted in the levy effort. I think looking at those results showed us that the community is aware of some of the issues that we're facing as we've gotten bigger, and want to make sure we have good response times, fire, police. And it just kind of makes me understand that some of those things that you feel yourself, it feels a little different. Not as comfortable, so we're looking for more resources within the city. I just want to make sure I understand this is like the first step, because these are the boots on the ground. And unfortunately, our local law enforcement are always, they seem to be dealing with a lot of repeat offenders. And I can only hope that as we look at the county level and at the state level, we start seeing some resources freed up and allocated. It's frustrating when we see our officers put their lives at risk, apprehend people, have eyewitnesses, and see plea deals. It's really frustrating to know that we have criminals who are just rotated through a revolving door back out into the community, which feeds back into this loop. We need more law enforcement officers because we have more and more of these things happening. So I can only hope that as we look at that system above us and our senior level of government right above us, we see the county commissioners look at what do we have to do to fix what's happening really through the judicial system at the county level. And then what happens, the question is it cart before the horse? Is the judicial system acting the way it is because it doesn't have the system in which to incarcerate criminals? Until we start to rebuild that, our police officers are going to continue to see a lot of the same issues that we've seen. Because as I've said before, we now live in a society that everybody makes excuses for everybody else. We don't have expectations for them. What's the expectation if I know I can commit a crime and 30 days later or 20 days later, I'm out like nothing happened? So I just urge everybody to talk to the county commissioners, talk to your state elected officials. We need to find a way to have real consequences for real hardened criminals. The same token, we have to go back and look at what happened in 2017, because a lot of what we're seeing is our law enforcement and our first responders at the fire department are dealing with issues that used to be dealt with within mental institutions. So in 2017, the legislature cut funding, as we've all talked about. Now, unfortunately, the concept was, well, the families will take care of these individuals. This is a family issue. Families don't know how to deal with these issues. And I know, in particular, our council is acutely aware through emails of some of these situations. So I just want to make sure that as a council, we talk with the county commissioners, ask them, let's look at, Kalispell made the first big step. It was a big ask, and the public responded. It's probably time to start looking at the county level. What can we do there to make sure the rest of the county can participate to help solve some of these issues? And then as we go forward, start looking at some of the elected officials at the state level. Look at the decisions they've made in the past and talk to them. What are some of the decisions we need to make in the future? And I think some of the things we need to look at are, let's look at those people who've been very effective as legislators and make sure we have their ear when they're in session back in Helena. As I've said, these chairs that we have, we are that direct interface. They have to take our calls. We're all in the club. We're like the little brother they hate, but we call them and we call them and we call them. So as the public sees these things, as you see, Mr. and Mrs. Regier, Mr. and Miss Regier, as you see John Fuller, as you see these individuals, as you see Mark Blaisdell who's working for the governor, ask him, what are we doing to make our community safer? Or are you going to buy votes with cutting expenses? Because Mr. Dowd, I know you agree in smaller government, but we all agree in smaller government, but where we really need government to be effective, that's not where we cut. That's not where we reduce. We look at the surplus, the other sides of government that we really don't like, those that tell us what to do. So I just urge everyone, bend their ear, call, email, call me, email me, and I'll relay your message to them for you. They love hearing from me. From here, and even when I'm personal phone calls, it's always entertaining. And with that, meeting's adjourned.